Today we're down here in Frankston with Aunty Marice, who's agreed to share her story with us today. So thank you, Aunty Marice.
Who are you and where are you from?
I'm an Atkinson, and I'm a Yorta Cummerjunga, I believe. And I was born at Chelsea. I was born at home.
So have you always lived on country?
Yes. Oh, apart from when I got married, I went over to New Zealand and Fiji and lived with my husbands over there for a while. I did stipulate husbands too.
Have you always identified as being Aboriginal?
I have always. I lived with my great-grandmother until she passed on, and she was a black woman. She taught me a lot of things, and she made me proud of who I was. Always.
While you went to school, did you have any issues with racism with other kids, questioning your Aboriginality?
No, it wasn't spoke of really, but if you were an Aboriginal child and you were dark of skin, you were always shunned by not only teachers but other students, or you'd even have people come up and lick their finger and rub it on your skin to see if you were chocolate. So it was, it just wasn't talked about, but when your principal knew that your mother was Aboriginal, then that was a different thing. You were always put down as a lower class person, even as a child. And my mother used to say to everybody, when she was growing up, she always said she's going to marry a black fella. I've had 3 husbands and they've all been black. Is that a good omen or a bad omen?
So tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, it's a very funny story. I can remember went from one place to another place living with different Aboriginal families, because even though my mother was a very educated woman and stuff like that, she ended up having a big problem with alcohol, as did a lot of Aboriginals in those times, because of the pain that was inflicted upon them from their own mothers, of the harshness of how they were treated as young people, and not knowing really being treated as a human being. So this pain went from my grandmother to my mother, from my mother to me. My mother ended up being a drinker because my father was a workaholic, but he was hardly ever home. So Mum just went a bit wayward, and I started taking off and living with just different families that I had met over in Fitzroy, and people like, I had an auntie, a blood auntie that was over there. I stayed with her and she introduced me around and said I was one of them. So I was in, and also because of not turning up at school because Mum being drunk half the time and going on a walkabout, we had truant officers in those days, and if you didn't go to school they'd come to your place and just pick you up and throw you in the car, and you ended up in a foundling, which is called an institution or a home. So I was in and out of institutions quite a lot, and then mixed with Aboriginal people because I feel I didn't belong to the other class of people. I knew more about Aboriginal culture and what our family was going through, so I kind of mingled always with Aboriginal people. We were always placed in different institutions, so we really didn't have that we knew who we were, but we didn't have that closeness of bond because that was taken away from us. So that's been a horrible thing, and then getting to know who your relatives were. And as a white-skinned black fella, I found it very hard to relate to some other Aboriginal people who were a dark skin, because they would say, you know, what's this, they'd call you a gub, what's this gub doing here? And I'd turn around and say, well, I'm not a white person at all. I'm a black person by what I feel in my own heart and what I know from my grandmother. And I'm proud of who I was.
What stereotype would you like to break about Aboriginal people?
Oh, the bullshit that we get everything for nothing. Start from there. Many years ago, I was in Alice Springs. I was with a lady called Rose Monkhouse. at Pitjantjatjara, and there was one helicopter and there was a big ball going on at the time. This is true. A big ball going on at the time being in the Alice itself. And this little Aboriginal boy, 2-year-old boy, fell in the coal, in the fire, and the ash stuck on his body. And it was radioed through that we needed an ambulance to transport him to hospital, and the words were, we can't, because we've got a big do going on. So what's more important, bloody white people going to a ball or the life of another human being, especially an Aboriginal person? Had it been a white person, you could bet your life it was there straight away. So, yeah, it's...
What do you think about all the deaths in custody that are still occurring, despite having a Royal Commission?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I look at the police in Alice Springs as the Ku Klux Klan. And they're still doing what the Ku Klux Klan has done for many years. They're deaths in custody. You cannot possibly hang yourself. The ceilings are far too high. The beds are screwed into the concrete floors, the same as the basin, the hand basin, and all this and that. Being an Aboriginal person, the moment you're picked up, they're to take any belt off you, if you've got a belt. They're to take the shoelaces out of your shoes, anything you can do damage with, and then they're put in. And with all the modern fandangles they've got in TVs and all this and that, impossible. It's impossible. They've been murdered. They cannot possibly do it themselves. I worked with Uncle Reg Blow in deaths in custody, and I was amazed at how some people were supposed to have killed themselves, which couldn't possibly have done it. No, could not have done it. So, and you know, like a few years ago, there was a man that was picked up for drunkenness, Aboriginal man. He was thrown in the back of the divvy wagon, and he was drove so many 100 miles from where they had picked him up to the police station, and he had died in the back of the van. No air conditioning, no water, while they're sitting in the front with their water and their cooling system on, and it's 50 odd degrees in Alice Springs in the back of the car. And they wonder why he was dead. They didn't give a damn. They didn't stop to see if he wanted to go to the toilet. They didn't stop to give him a drink of water. Nah, they know what they're doing. They are. They're just like the Ku Klux Klan. You know?
Aboriginal culture is being embraced by mainstream, or do you think it's still being questioned a lot by mainstream?
I think a lot of it's still being questioned. Who's who? If you're white skin, are you really a black fella? How do you know you are a black fella? You know, and stuff like that. I think we're still getting questioned by it. For whatever reason, we're the only black race in the world that dies out with the white coming into it. And that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to wipe us completely out. We didn't have a brain, so they thought.
Do you remember the referendum, the 1967 referendum?
Well, I did have a dispute about that. You know, I had an argument about that. Sure, we should be in the census. We're people. You know, and we're here before anyone else. Yeah. I can't understand why a so-called educated person would even think that way. You know, how can you not count a person that's there if you could see them? You know, we're not the ghost who walks, as the saying goes. Yeah.
Did you or your family ever have exemption certificates?
My mother did. My grandma did. Yeah. I have a piece of paper here that belonged to my great-grandmother, and apparently she had to go and get milk, goat's milk at the time being, because Mum and I are both allergic to milk. We can only drink soya milk or goat's milk. And she had to go from Chelsea to Brunswick for this milk in those days, and she had to have this card that was around her wrist to give her the right to go between the hours of whatever. So I've still got that. Yeah.
A lot of people, when I do training, have never heard an exemption certificate before.
Yeah.
How would you define?
I have
How would you explain it to people?
Oh, my brain's rattled at the moment. I can't explain it. I just think it's a bigotry of the white race thinking they're superior to all mankind, and especially to the black kind of people. It's more or less like another, like Hitler. Can I put it to that? Like Hitler wanting blonde-headed, blue-eyed boys only and girls. And he had like the birthing barn where he picked out so many white, beautiful white ladies, pure white ladies, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and they were to give freely sex to the soldiers so he could have a pure white Eurasian race. And I feel it's the same thing. Yeah.
Because now we've got confirmation of Aboriginality certificates.
Yes.
How do you feel about them?
Well, I think it's like a bloody pedigree for a dog or an animal. I think if you're known in your community by your family name and you got living relatives still there, whether they be white skin or black skin, and they can prove verbally, I think, isn't that enough? Someone's got to know somebody along the line. If it comes to the point of people making money because they are Aboriginals by their painting and their life stories, which is their paintings, I think then you have to be known by a co-op or who else is in authority. Who else is in authority? And you should then have a number or whatever. And, you know, you just, who you are, like Axe and Hunter, and then who your mother married, and then who your other parents are. And you should be able to get that paper like I've got here, you know. I think, unfortunately, because a lot of people have been taken away from their family, it is hard to know where you belong. You feel it in your heart and your mind, but to have that evidence, which is really hard. And then if you're not accepted by your own, by them trying to look or help you, then there's not much hope for you really finding out who you are, is there?
Have you experienced any racism yourself? And if so, how do you overcome racism?
Yes, I have. I had an art exhibition once, and I had this woman come up to the curator and she wanted to know who the artist was, and he said, well, you're very lucky that she's an Aboriginal woman, and she's here. And when I came over, the first thing she done was get her figure like this. How disgusting. My God, she said, you could be in a lot of trouble saying you are something you are not. She said, and you're doing Aboriginal work. And I said, well, my resume is right up near that photo. Did you not read it? That tells you who I am, what tribe I am, and who I'm affiliated with. And if you want to know more, start ringing up, what's it called? Link up. Ring up Link Up. And I'll give you the resume number and stuff like that. Oh, and then she turned around quite nicely. She said, oh, well, she said, you don't look Aboriginal. In fact, you don't even have to say who you are. So that's racism, as far as I'm concerned. I was disgusted. I said to the curator, I don't care how much money this lady's got. She's not to buy one of my paintings. I wouldn't have her buy my paintings. She's not buying my story and my life and my pain and my happiness at the same time. No.
Do you think racism's changed over time, or do you think we're
It's still there. It's a bit more hidden. It's still there. Yeah.
significant events in your life that really made you question your Aboriginality?
when I'm asked by other Aboriginal people who you are and who's your mother, or I haven't heard of you and all this and that, and then because of a lot of things have been taken away from you, like family and different things like that, and being institutionalised, you're inclined to be very wayward in lots of ways, and makes you want to stand up and fight for what you believe in, and that's exactly what I do. Stand up and fight and talk about what I believe in. And I want children to go through life doing the same thing, and then you have a better feeling about yourself. And if you have a better feeling about yourself, you're educating other people in the right way too. Yeah.
What do you think are one or two of the major issues that Aboriginal people face today?
Well, some cases they don't feel accepted. Some they think they're lower class than another person. Self-esteem. You've got to give them self-esteem, and you've got to make them proud of what they're doing, and you can do anything if you try. If you get put down, just come up again, because you're as good as the next person. You know, and it's not going to come to you on a silver plate. You've got to work for everything and you've got to believe in what you're working for.
What advice would you give young Aboriginal people that want to know more about culture? Where should they start finding out?
Going to school. So you can keep up with the white man. Education will take you anywhere. So the first thing you've got to do is educate yourself. You've got to belong to a co-op. So you're meeting people and learning from them. I find as a younger person, the best education I had was by listening to elders. Better than what I could ever get out of school. And they've got the opportunity of schools now, so I would suggest get yourself educated.
How do you define the qualities of a good Aboriginal elder or leader?
What they've done in society, what they've taught their children, what they've taught other people, the respect that they give to their elders, respect that they give to a person with knowledge who's trying to help other people in the community, and to assimilate and learn. I think learning is the best part to keep up with the white person, because otherwise our voice is just in the wilderness. And our women are the strong bones of the country. We're the ones that push. We've got a few men that'll stand up and be counted now, but once before the men just gave up because their manhood was taken away from them. Their hunting was taken away from them. Their dominance was taken away from them and stuff like that. And the women used to be under their thumb many years ago, but it's a different kettle of fish now.
Things that you'd like people to take away from hearing your story?
Doesn't matter the colour of your skin. If you know what you are, always be proud of it and find out as much as you can, because it's history that'll live on. It's a verbal history that'll live on before paper history usually lives on, and how much is fiction and how much is fact. And the fact comes from the storytelling. That's what the fact comes from. You can eliminate things and put things in a different category if you're writing a book. You put it in your way of thinking, but it might not be the right way. So I find your verbal speaking and stuff like that is more of a learning tool than anything. And if you're learning, then you pass it on. So your history can't die at all if you keep talking about it. Yeah. And thank you very much for allowing me to do it. It's been a great pleasure. It's been reminiscing on my history, which is very painful at times, but it's storytelling, and I'm proud that I'm still here to do that.
Yep.
Thank you, too. Thank you.
Oh,